if you just kind of baseline yourself and just allow these two things to do more than these things, and definitely more than this thing, you will for sure have better communication, and you'll be able to actually engage in better conversations through both patient to healthcare provider, a healthcare provider to colleague, and then healthcare provider to family and friends.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Frustrated to Fluent. I'm your host, Devon Bruce. I'm the founder and CEO of the English Communication Academy, and we help non-native English speakers in healthcare communicate effectively with their patients, colleagues, and staff. And today I'm speaking with James Rocha. He is the Chief Revenue Officer at Equips, which helps hospitals and surgery centers optimize their maintenance operations and dispatch processes. He's also a business owner with over 20 years of experience helping healthcare professionals lift the fog and bring clarity and transparency to their work order management and vendor equipment contracts with their hospitals and surgery centers. And he also is a specialist in effective communication as well. So, James, thank you so much for being here. I'm really excited to talk to you about what we're going to be discussing today.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm very excited to be here and to speak with you as well.
Thank you, James. So the reason why that I'm excited to talk to you is because you are an expert in communication, specifically emotional intelligence. And one thing that I see on the language learning side is that a lot of people think it's just perfecting their grammar or learning the idioms and expressions. And no, there is a whole lot of other things that go into affecting in order to communicate effectively. And that's something that we do at the Academy. We really focus on the non-textbook stuff. One of them is emotional intelligence, which is rarely discussed in language learning. And I know that you know all about that. So that's why I'm so excited to talk to you about this today, because I know it's going to help people communicate effectively. So I'm just going to ask you point blank, what exactly is emotional intelligence, and why is it so important for non-native English speakers in healthcare?
Yeah, it's a great question. If I could just add some context behind that before I answer your question, I'm not trying to beat around the bush. The reason why emotional intelligence is so important to me is that it was trained to me long time ago, right in its kind of beginning stages. This is about 15 years ago when it was starting to be trained in corporate America. And it was trained to us as a sales professional to try to really engage with our customer base and the healthcare professionals that we engage with. And I thought it was one of the best trainings that I did in my professional career. And working for 4 different Fortune 100 companies, I was privy to and fortunate enough to do a lot of really amazing trainings throughout my career. Fast forward to when I started becoming a coach, business and executive coach about 4 years ago, I really got passionate about emotional intelligence and how to train individuals in both a corporate setting and a small business setting with emotional intelligence, different programs that we have, and all revolves around communication skills. So why it's important for people is emotional intelligence really just refers to the understanding of managing your emotions, but as well as picking up the cues and kind of the emotions of those you talk to and understanding how to kind of chameleonize yourself to really effectively communicate with those people. Barring a text message or an email, when you are communicating with someone, be it virtually or in person, the tone of your voice, the way you're speaking, your mannerisms, and then your body language is actually have proven to be about 80% of the communication. If you think about that, only 20% of that is the actual words you're putting together and putting out to that person. It's how you're delivering that, the way in which you're doing it, the tone that you're speaking to them in, and then if you're kind of mimicking the way that person kind of jives, right? It's the world is kind of divided into 4 quadrants of people, and the way you are intrinsically is the way you generally communicate, unless you've really gotten good at understanding how to change their communication style to really preaching to the audience in which you're talking to, be that one-on-one, one-on-five, or one-on-500. So a long-winded answer to that very brief question, but I hope I answered it.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense because emotional intelligence, like I said, is not something that's discussed in the language side of things. And there's a lot that goes into it. And when that's not addressed, it can cause a myriad of communication breakdowns. Right. So I appreciate you thoroughly explaining what it is and why it's important, especially for non-native English speakers in healthcare, because there's usually other things that are going on with them, which I'll get into in a few. But that's one reason why that in the academy, we focus so much on things they don't learn in a textbook because they know English already. They're already fluent. Some of them are extremely fluent, but they still feel stuck in their ability to communicate. So thank you very much for explaining what it is and why it's so important. So now moving on, so that way people can understand it in a bit more of a context. What are some of the early warning signs that someone may be emotionally reactive rather than emotionally intelligent in the workplace?
Yeah, if you notice that you get very frustrated very fast with people and that you're quick to judge, you're quick to create assumptions, and you're not able to deviate from those assumptions regardless to what you're hearing from the people you're talking to, and you're just steadfast on one small path on a one-way street, those are telltale signs that you're not really channeling your emotional intelligence and that you're letting your inner monologue kind of take over instead of what everyone really should do is, you got 2 ears, 1 mouth for a reason, is you should listen a lot more than you speak. And when you speak, you should utilize what you were listening to prior to speaking. And so a lot of people that have a hard time channeling their emotional intelligence and it becomes a rather large obstacle for them, they just seem to be very angry and agitated with people, especially in a professional setting, because in their minds, they're like, why don't these people understand? Why don't these people get it? How come these people aren't listening to me? But at the end of the day, a lot of it, 9.5 out of 10 times, it's actually the individual that's not listening to everyone else. It's the individual that's putting assumptions and their biases into a situation and not truly looking at the bigger picture, the how and the why instead of just the what. And those are just telltale signs that, unfortunately, a large percentage of people suffer. And I say the word suffer just because you can have such a better life, both intrinsically, extrinsically, with your connections, with yourself, if you are a little bit more open, if you're allowing yourself to be empathetic, if you're allowing yourself to be a better communicator and an active listener, and it'll build trust to make your life easier, because then the people that you're working with, you will trust them, they will trust you, and it'll be a lot more fluid, especially with healthcare professionals and their patients, for sure.
That's actually a really good segue into my next question, because that, I feel, is something that people struggle with, is the misinterpretations of different things, like either cultural differences, a language barrier especially. And if there's all of these different biases that are going on, maybe even subconsciously, that can cause a lot of problems on the healthcare worker, because it could erode their confidence. It could make them feel like they aren't qualified. There's just all these things that go along with it. So this is actually, like I said, a really good segue into this next question. And I really want to hear your thoughts on this. So how can medical professionals handle situations where their emotions are misinterpreted due to either a cultural difference or a language barrier? And I wanted to ask you this question because back when I was an English coach and I was taking on personal clients, I worked with someone in particular who was having a lot of issues with their ability to communicate. Long story short, it ultimately ended up being the way he spoke. In his native language, they don't use their voice for clarity. Whereas in English, we do use our voice for clarity. And so he came across as angry all the time and agitated and not empathetic. And that caused so much stress on not only his staff and his patients, but also within himself. He felt horrible about it. So anyway, I'm saying all this to ask you, When it's situations like that, how can medical professionals handle when there's that big misinterpretation?
Yeah. So thank you for bringing up that story, because stories speak 1,000 words, right? And it gives
Yeah.
you good context to visualize. What I generally try to convey to people while we're doing emotional intelligence training is that they have to do a little bit of perspective taking, and they have to kind of stop what they're doing and just speak to the individual or individuals that they're engaging with. And with a healthcare professional, because especially in this day and age, they're swamped, right? They're being
Mm-hmm.
asked to do 100 things where it takes in the time that someone should take to do 50 things, right? So
Yeah,
they're kind of having
you're
a
right.
double dip. But if they would just put the chart down and just look at the patient in the eye and be compassionate about how they deliver their message. Because again, back to the what we said originally is 80% of communication is body language and tone, and a lot of it is tone. So
Mm.
if you're coming from a country where you're supposed to deliver a message in a stern way because it's fact, well, a fact can also be kind of shadowed by opinion, right? Depending on the professional stat of the person you're engaging with. If someone doesn't really know medicine and you're talking to them, they don't really know a lot of what you're saying. And if they don't have the trust in what you're saying because you didn't earn that through compassion, through empathy, you did earn it as your profession because you're a doctor or you're a nurse or you're a PA or
Mm-hmm.
but you haven't earned their trust as of
Yeah.
yet. So by just humanizing yourself and just letting them know you are 100% engaged with them, they are all that matters right now during this conversation. And then if they ask certain technical questions, you have to go to the chart and you say, well, let me look at the chart 1 second. And then you go, you don't look at a chart and just quickly glance at them while you're talking, because they just think you're just talking away from them, and you're not, you don't care, right? And if you don't care, is this person really giving me the best advice? Whereas if from the get-go they think you care and you've established a human
Mm-hmm.
connection, they're going to really believe in what you say, both because of your professional stature, being your medical degree or what have you, but also because you've engaged with them, right? You've shown them that they matter. You're in this for them. Now let's get through this together as best as possible.
I think people forget is that the healthcare workers are human, and especially with some of the things I have heard throughout the years, it's hard for them to humanize the information sometimes because they're in a position of leadership. And so that can cause a lot of problems, especially when there is a cultural barrier or a language barrier. So thank you for bringing that up in regards to how important trust is and how to build that trust in a hard situation like that. That's incredibly helpful.
Absolutely.
Now, to continue on with this, like I said, a lot of them feel that they're very worried about how they're perceived. They want to make sure that they come across as qualified. They want to make sure that the patient or their boss know that they deserve to be in the room. So how can they use emotional intelligence to build stronger connections with their patients, colleagues, and staff?
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, have to go into a conversation with someone, regardless to if they're your boss, your patient, your brother, your wife, your husband, what have
Mm-hmm.
you. You have to go in at somewhat of a neutral state, right? So like if you just came off of a, you know, argument with someone, what have you, in another room, and you're going into, in patient room A, and now you're going in patient room B, you have to kind of ground yourself and kind of clear the mechanism, right? Because you have this language barrier, you have these nonverbal cues kind of going against you. Well, if you're going in already a little bit agitated, that's it's gonna it's gonna be very,
Yeah.
very obvious, right? So just
Yeah.
take a few moments to do some deep breathing exercises. You know what a lot of people call like PQ reps kind of things, is just kind of ground yourself and then go in as neutral state as possible, and then utilizing really empathetic language. And then as you're communicating, and again, that eye contact is so, so important on building that trust, regardless to what culture you're from, right? Cultural
Mm-hmm.
sensitivity doesn't really come into play with eye contact unless it's a human to a dog. Then you're not supposed to do eye contact. human to human eye contact is pretty important throughout all countries. And so the other thing is, once you're engaging with someone and you tell them, I'm prescribing X because of Y. Do you understand why I'm prescribing X because of Y? And then you just let them speak. Yeah, I kind of get it. All right, so you understand why I'm doing this. So we can move on? Yeah, we can move on. Awesome. Thank you so much. And then you go to the next thing, and you're always seeking that clarification from them and asking questions about the information you're giving. So you're bringing them along to the journey, right? You're not just dictating to them. You're saying what you think. What do you think? Oh, this is what you think, and this is why. Are we correct on that? Yes, we are. Outstanding. Okay. Do you have any other questions for me of what we've been talking about? Because I'm here for you. And you have to constantly make sure that you're explaining that, especially from a healthcare professional to a patient. They need to hear from your words that you are here for them. They are doing everything they can in your best interest. You can't just assume that they know that or think that, right? Some people are just, for whatever reason, I still don't understand this. It's that white coat syndrome. They're deathly afraid of anyone in a white coat. Never could understand it, but it is what it is.
Yeah.
So you got to understand that that's that perspective taking and kind of getting their emotional cues, because if they're nervous and afraid, it honestly doesn't really matter what you say. Remember, 80% is nonverbal, right? So like you got to break that down. You got to humanize yourself to just building that trust. And some of the way to do that is bringing them into the fold, asking them questions, having them kind of engage with you. And once you have them engaged, you're starting to build their trust, especially if you're doing it from a neutral standpoint with empathy, clarification questions, and utilizing active listening.
Interesting that you said that in order to have a lot of emotional intelligence, you pretty much have to remove the emotional part aspect out of it and be neutral when you are engaging with people. I don't know. I find that just very interesting, because you're right. You have to be grounded in your emotions in order to handle whatever comes your way. And I think a lot of people miss that on so many fronts.
Yeah,
so it just makes so much sense that in order to communicate effectively, you have to be grounded and neutral in your emotions.
Yeah, I mean,
especially in healthcare.
Yeah, I try to use the analogy of like, pretend like you're traveling. If you're traveling with 4 bags you need to check, a giant carry-on and a backpack and a bag full of snacks and whatnot, it's difficult to travel that way, right?
Yeah.
Well, what if you're going to the same destination, but all you have is a backpack? And it's comfortable and it's light and it's right there on your back, and you don't even think about it. And you're just walking through TSA, you're walking through everything. And it's the same thing with a communication. If you're coming into that communication with a bunch of baggage, it's tough. And you're stressed and you're worried and you're thinking about that bags. Are they going to arrive to my destination? Am I going to be overweight and have to pay a fee? And all those things, right? Yeah. Just think of that from an analogy standpoint. The least amount of baggage you can bring to a communication, the easier it is to communicate. Same way, the easier it is to travel with absolutely almost no bags. To really kind of hit that analogy is just thinking about it. And everyone's traveled for the most part, especially if you're foreign country working in America. You've definitely traveled, and you've probably brought a lot of baggage when you came here, and you can attest to how stressful that is. And so if you're able to do that and just kind of, as I mentioned, clear the mechanism to just engage with that person and not have all that background stuff. Because if you're thinking about other things and like a bunch of stuff is weighing you down, the person you're engaging with, they pick up on that. And their first thought is, this guy or gal isn't even really here. They don't care about me. They're just checking the box, and on they go. But if you come in and you're just fully engaged with that individual patient and you're listening to them, your eye contact is good, you're reiterating certain things with clarifying questions, you have earned their trust. You have, completely immersed yourself in the situation, and you have made that emotional tie with them during that communication. And it's going to make your life so much easier. It's very easy to say, Devon, and very difficult to actually do. Because as I mentioned, especially as a healthcare professional, you're being asked to do a lot more than you really should. But I don't know if that's going to change. So that's kind of out of your control. how you deal with it and how you engage yourself, that 100% is in your control. And then you
Mm-hmm.
just have to work on the ability to just clear yourself, go, engage, be the best version of you can with each patient, and then do that, replicate that per
Yeah.
patient or per dialogue you have with, like you mentioned, your boss, your
Yeah.
coworkers, what have you, because it all falls suit, right? If your coworkers think you're constantly in their corner and you're reliable and that you actually, he gets me or she gets me, they're going to open up to you, they're going to engage with you, they're going to trust you, and life will be much easier for you and everyone around you.
I appreciate you going, you talking about that because, yeah, again, you are really talking about how and why this is so important in healthcare. And so to wrap up, I'm actually going to ask you two questions in
Yes.
one. So, what are some practical ways that non-native English speakers can improve their emotional intelligence? And if someone wanted to improve their emotional intelligence today, what's the first step that they can take?
Yeah, well, first step would be that kind of like that baseline is learn about emotional intelligence. And you can read a
Okay.
number of different books or books online or audiobooks or what have you, just to understand, like, because the history of it, and it goes back to when we were cave people, and our fight or flight, right? And that fight or flight now with
Mm-hmm.
our, our much more advanced intellect is more like, is this person trying to sell me a bag of goods? Is this a situation that I shouldn't be in? And that little voice in your head is constant, right? And you have to learn how to kind of in not so much meditation, even though meditation is phenomenal, but it's not practical while you're working and and not in like a quiet
Right.
environment. But there's things you can do that really calm yourself. You have to close your eyes. You can like rub your fingertips. You can look at the breeze in a tree and just really, and just a calming effect. And
Mm-hmm.
so to learn those things, just open up your mentality to any of the various, top 10 books. You Google it, emotional
Mm-hmm.
intelligence, and any one of them that comes up is going to give you good nuggets of knowledge. That's a
Okay.
baseline, right? And then the other
Okay.
way is engaging with different groups that, like coaches like myself or anyone out there, that actually brings people together in small groups. I would never do a large group. I think the most you'd want to be in a group is 8. And the
Okay.
beauty of that is you're not on a one-on-one, you're feeding off everyone, and you're
Mm-hmm.
kind of training like you fight. Because if you are doing an emotional intelligence class or course or what have you with one person, you're not always engaging with just one person, right? Whereas if you're
Yeah.
learning with a group, you're really learning little cues on how to deal with you, and maybe certain things that other people are doing will fall perfect for you. And they're going to ask questions that you might have asked, but might not have asked, or might not even thought about. And so those group activities and building that emotional intelligence muscle, because it is a muscle, you're actually having to
Mm.
change the neuropathic ways of your mind if you really want to get into emotional intelligence. It's not just like reading a book and you're done. It's actually a good amount of work, and it's something you have to constantly apply. And I can tell you, after I was kind of certified in emotional intelligence and really started to exercise that, my communication skills tripled in in value.
Wow.
My ability to speak to my 15-year-old daughter was life changing. Spoke to my wife a lot
That's
better. We had,
awesome.
but it just helps in so many ways. But I will warn you, it's work, like everything, right?
Yeah.
Nothing good is easy. And it's work that you kind of constantly have to just tune up. Once you have that good baseline, you just have to kind of, utilize your emotional intelligence, muscle building skills, however you see is the best for you, 5, 10, 20 minutes a day, if that, while you're
Mhm.
driving, while you're walking, while you're doing anything, you can do these things to really kind of change those neuropathic ways and kind of distinguish those voices in your head that are telling you to judge this, don't do that, and just live your life very eyes wide open. Because the old saying is the mind knows what the eyes see, and the eyes see what the mind knows. Well,
So
if you
true.
if you just kind of baseline yourself and just allow these two things to do more than these things, and definitely more than this thing,
Mhm.
you will for sure have better communication. You'll have more trust within the people that you're speaking with. They will trust you, you will trust them, and you'll be able to actually engage in better conversations through both patient to healthcare provider, a healthcare provider to colleague, and then healthcare provider to family and friends.
Awesome. Thank you so much. That's very actionable steps that people can take today if they want to communicate more effectively in healthcare. So thank you. That was really helpful.
Of course. Thank you.
All right. So James, where can people find you?
LinkedIn or my website, but LinkedIn is probably the easiest. Like you can, read my bio, you can DM me and we can chat. On a one-on-one, there's various groups that I run for emotional intelligence, usually with clients of mine and their staffs, but I have done quarterly open emotional intelligence training, and that's it's a 6 to 8 week, depending on which one you want. Course, I just advocate that everyone spend some time to really kind of hone in on emotional intelligence, because it's so important, because we were all born with the IQ we have. Everyone can be more emotionally intelligent by just actively trying and pushing themselves to just be a better communicator.
Awesome. All right. So his links are in the description box below. And if you are struggling with your emotional intelligence, or if you need additional support, you can always join us in our academy. It's free for anyone in healthcare. The link for that is in the description box below. So thank you very much for tuning in. It was so nice to have you here, James. Thank you so much for coming on. This was a great conversation. Thank you guys for tuning in, and I'll see you next time. Take care.
Take care all. Thank you.